Well, thank you for attending the webinar today and giving me some of your time. I sure wish I could make HIPAA exciting. Many of the things that I teach and do are really exciting and they're a lot of fun. I just can't make HIPAA that way, but I'll do my best to blast through it, and we'll see if we can't help you with the threats that exist. Now, the fact that you're here wanting to get your HIPAA score says to me that you probably have either some concern that you want to make sure that your existing HIPAA program hits the basic areas of compliance, and so you're kind of double checking, or for most of you, you probably have a true concern that you in fact have a deficiency of some sort. So don't shoot the messenger. I promise you that I'm not in agreement with or liking everything that has to happen, but unfortunately, the threats these days are just too big, they're too expensive. We just cannot ignore being compliant. 3 or 4 years ago, when I was teaching this information and I was doing license renewals and that type of thing, I used to say, get the information, it's coming, it's going to be a problem. They're starting to enforce more things with Obamacare and electronic medical records. It's just adding fuel to the fire, and things like the target breach of patient identification through their pharmacies and through their identity theft potentials. The public has gone crazy. The government's using all of their agencies now to enforce protection of privacy. They're combining agencies, and it's just crazy. 2014 has several brand new threats that really were not issues prior to. So I really can't say any longer, oh, get a training system and implement a little bit every month, and at the end of a year, you'll have a good system in place. I now have to train, when I train license renewals, etc., that you needed this 6 months ago and you got to do it right now. And there's just not a reason or a way that you can wait any longer. So today, you either know about these new threats or you have some concern over the threats from the rules that went into effect in 2003 and 2005. There are two sets of rules for HIPAA, the privacy rules and the security rules. They both apply to practically every office out there, and they're being more and more enforced, even the old rules. So we have to make sure that the stuff that has supposed to have been in place, some of it for 10 years, is in place because they're enforcing it now, where they were not enforcing it very much in the past. And or the new threats that have come out have gained your attention. Again, some of the new threats are on the screen right now. That's not what this webinar is about. If you want to know more about the new threats, if you want to know more about the issues and why this is of such concern, please give us a call. Go back on the website, find information. We're glad to answer any questions you might have. Today, what we're going to do is get your HIPAA score. Now, we're going to go through this, and these are similar to what an audit would be, or audit questions. These are more general and broad than most audit questions would be, but it's to give you an idea of where you stand. This scoring system is like golf. The lower the score, the better. You don't want points. Points are bad in this test. So here's a question that you might ask yourself, or a statement you might make, and whether it's true or not. We have this is the new Notice of Patient Privacy Policy, and we're giving it to every new patient as is required by the omnibus rules. If you did not change your Notice of Patient Privacy Policy last year in 2013 based on the omnibus rules, then give yourself 50 points. The omnibus rule went into effect in September of 2013 after being enacted in January of 2013. Basically, they gave us 9 months to become compliant with the new rules, and those rules were enacted to focus upon areas of abuses that had been identified and to allow increased fines and enforceability for those areas. So failing to follow those rules is just asking to be fined at this point. And there's this little thing called willful neglect, which is defined by HIPAA as that which the doctor knew or should have known and did not do. So the fact that this went into effect or was law in January, but then effective date of September, they gave you 9 months. They're saying if you're not doing it now, you're in willful neglect. And that's a minimum $50,000 fine. It could go up to $1.5 million. It's non-negotiable. Next one. We've reviewed and updated documentation to our HIPAA compliance manual, whether it's hard copy or electronic format, in the last 6 months. If no, give yourself 10 points. The reason is the HIPAA program is supposed to be dynamic and active. This means the changes have to be constantly updated with appropriate documentation. You have to keep up with the new requirements, and you have to write policies and procedures that are needed. If your manual hasn't had anything happen in several months, then it is not considered a dynamic program, and that's going to put you in risk of being fined. Okay, next one. We have added corrective actions to our compliance manual and performed proper follow-up to verify appropriate actions were taken, and we've done this within the last 6 months. Again, this is part of the active ongoing portion. You are supposed to find things that are wrong, things that you're not protecting, and you're supposed to take appropriate corrective action. Maybe most importantly, you are supposed to document that action. So you have to put, who's going to do what by when, have it signed and dated, or it was not done. That's how auditors look at it. It was not done. But if you're finding and fixing things, this is one of your main ways to avoid fines, because if they see that you're active and doing stuff, they tend to cut you a lot of slack. If not, they don't cut any slack. Next, our employee confidentiality statements are in place and have been updated at least annually. If you have no employee confidentialities in place, give yourself 10 points. This is a requirement and should be signed before an employee who's newly employed ever has any access to any patient files or patient information. It's not required that you update these annually, but it's a good idea. And it's really nice. You have to do ongoing education at least annually. It's a good time while you're doing your training with the required topics that at the end of that training, just have everybody sign a new confidentiality form. It shows that everyone's taking it seriously. Next, we've identified all of our business associates per the new omnibus rule definitions and have the newly required business associate contracts in place. If you don't, give yourself 50 points. This was in the omnibus rules. It's something they're looking to enforce. They were having problems with doctors giving information or having outside people have access to patient health information, and then failing to make sure that those outside sources were protecting the information. This was causing a lot of breaches and problems, and they've taken extra steps, new rules and regulations to make sure that this is handled. Next would be, we have performed the required annual privacy and security rule in service and covered all of the required topics in that presentation. There are required things that you must cover on an annual basis in training, and that's basically an in-service is nothing but a training. But there are, again, the privacy and security rules. If you've not done this at least annually, security rules have other requirements of ongoing training that are more than annual. But if you haven't done at least annual, you have to give yourself 50 points. This is a top priority because HIPAA says that nearly every breach that occurs, every problem that takes place happens because of human error, humans not knowing what they should or shouldn't be doing, or how to properly handle, transfer, or store data. So this is one they're looking for. Are you training your people? If you're not and don't have it documented in your HIPAA compliance manual, then you are just setting yourself out there for fines. Our annual audit schedule is documented in writing and placed in the HIPAA compliance manual. It's interesting, but you have to audit your audits. There are certain audits you have to do every year, and you have to audit the fact you actually did the audits. I know it sounds crazy, but you need to have an audit schedule in your HIPAA manual. If you don't have one, give yourself 20 points. What's this about? Well, there are certain audits that have to be done. So either on a monthly or quarterly basis, you need a schedule that says we're doing XYZ audit in this quarter or at this date, and then later in the year we're doing this audit, and later in the year we're doing this audit, and have an actual schedule of them. Then, if you haven't completed it yet in that year, but an auditor comes in and looks, you'll have a record and documentation that says you're going to, and that may not completely save you, but it will certainly help, especially if they see you've done it in prior years and then they realize that you just haven't gotten to it this year, but your audit schedule says you will. Okay, next we have a named compliance officer who has a signed job description and posting that appears in our HIPAA manual. If no, give yourself 25 points. You must have a compliance officer, and the first thing that an auditor coming in is going to look for is they're going to want your HIPAA compliance manual to open it up to the compliance officer to find out who it is they're supposed to be speaking to. So it kind of makes sense. Next, we've completed and documented a HIPAA risk analysis to meet requirements as well as to satisfy attestation if you're doing meaningful use for core value number 15 relative to EMR systems. A checklist risk analysis is not adequate. If you were told that by somebody, including your software company, they are incorrect. The law actually states that a checklist is not adequate. And if this is a no, give yourself 100 points. Probably should give yourself more, but we'll call it 100 because this lack of a risk analysis not only puts you in violation of HIPAA and may set you up to be audited for HIPAA, but also these meaningful use checks that are coming out from the attestations that you do on electronic medical records. These can be $18,000 a year for a couple of years, $12,000 after that, and a decrease. There are people that are not getting their checks issued when they certainly thought they were, and there's people who are in danger of having their checks revoked and taken back because of the audits that started in 2014. These are new. If you don't know about them, well, you haven't got notified yet or heard of a friend that did, but there are people losing money, having money taken back, and open themselves up to HIPAA violation inspections because what they're doing is in the audit on meaningful use, they're asking you to attest to some things you attested to. In other words, if you did an attestation, it means you swore to certain things you did. Now they're asking you to prove it. And they usually ask for several things, but one they always ask for is to prove for core measure 15, where you attested and swore that you had a HIPAA compliant risk analysis. They're saying prove it and send us a copy. And if you can't do it, they are taking back their money and possibly opening up investigations. Okay, next, I performed and documented the required annual review audit, not to be confused with annual in-service training. You're required at least annually to have an audit and review that audit of your entire compliance program, all aspects of it. If you have not done that audit, don't know how to do it, don't know what I'm talking about, give yourself 50 points. Okay, we covered that pretty quickly. Next, I have a policy and procedure documented which addresses which audit logs are turned on and how often they are reviewed. This is one of the key security policies that are extremely important. There are about 35 security policies, depending on how you lump them together and mix them up, that you are required to have in writing in your HIPAA compliance manual. If you don't have them, well, there was a clinic fined $130,000, $150,000 the other day for the lack of a single security policy. They had a breach of information, which was considered accidental, incidental, probably could not be avoided. They weren't fined for that, but they were fined for the fact that they did not have a security policy in place that stated how those people that were breached would be notified and how the government would be notified. So if you do not know what I'm talking about with audit logs, if you don't have security policies in place, we're going to talk about that later, but this is specifically on one policy that has to do with audit logs. That's 25 points. These audit logs see who's accessing your PHI, your patient health information, and is what's being done when they access. Are they changing data? Are they just looking at data? Are they adding data? What are they doing? Next, I have policies, procedures, and technology in place that protects all practice devices that contain PHI. There are several policies, security policies, and there are lots of technologies, passwords, encryption, etc., that must be in place on all devices that contain PHI. That your fax machine has a hard drive in it that makes copies of the copies before it makes the copies. Your copy machine usually has a hard drive in it. All your computers, possibly laptops, iPads, phones, all have the potential for storing PHI. If they do store PHI, you have to have policies and procedures in place and technology in place to protect that PHI. If you don't have that on every single piece of equipment in the office, give yourself 50 points. I've established the capability to safely transfer patient health information electronically to the patient if requested by the patient in that form per the new omnibus rule requirements. This is if you don't have that, if you cannot transfer patient health information to the patient electronically, safely, encrypted, etc., That is required now as of last year by the omnibus rules. Give yourself 50 points if you can't do that. Okay, this is one of the omnibus rules that applies to electronic medical records. If you have electronic medical record system, you do have the capability to send things secured even if you haven't been taught how to do it, if it's a certified system, because the system can't be certified without that capability. I have a documented contingency plan in place that includes emergency operation mode and disaster recovery procedures. If you don't have a written contingency plan, this is required by HIPAA. If you don't have it, give yourself 50 points. It's often a missed or ignored requirement in HIPAA. It's important, but it's also, I want to tell you that I also do practice development and consulting, and over the years I've been doing that. I have lost, several people have lost their clinic to fires, tornadoes, and if you don't have a plan for getting back up and running within 24 to 48 hours, you can lose so much income that it can put a practice out of business. And if you do have a good plan, you can actually be up and functioning in a day or two, keep your cash flow going while you make those bigger changes and modifications in life that have to happen when a building burns down or a tornado blows it over. So it's a good thing for business as well. Next, I have technology and procedures in place to protect the transmission of all PHI data in all forms that it's transmitted. If you don't, give yourself 75 points. This is a big bad area. If you do not have this covered and encrypted and know what you're doing, you need to get it in place. You might have to get some IT people to come in, on a temporary short time basis and help you, but you need to have that, and you need to have it documented in your compliance manual. It's a very common area where patient health information is breached. I've written all the required security policies for the security rules. If you've not done this, give yourself 150 points. This is, as I mentioned earlier, there's one clinic had a $150,000 fine for one single policy not being in place. There are many, many things today in this world. This is a list right here of a lot of the policies and procedures that you have to have in place. And if you don't have them, you can be just missing one or two, and it can leave you vulnerable and where you can have complaints. Now, what do we do about scoring? Well, when we score this thing a 0 to 50, well, good for you. You're in great shape. Now, you're still going to have to stay diligent and on top of changes in the rules. This is the government. They're changing constantly. You never know when a complaint may be filed or what specific thing it might cite, or when a random auditor will come in. They have hired outside random auditing companies, and they are doing random audits. But you've done a lot of work if you're at this point and your compliance program's looking to be in pretty good shape. Now, if you're in the 50 to 200, you've either got too many minor issues or you've got one major issue. And these are things that frequently result in fines. Almost every question statement that I put into this score analysis, this risk score analysis, are finable if they're not handled correctly. And so if you got much going on, if you don't have the basics, the score is for the basics. If you don't have the basics in place, you're going to be probably in trouble if you have a problem, a complaint, or a random audit, because HIPAA also says that meeting all of the HIPAA standards is the floor of compliance, not the ceiling of compliance. And they say that clinics should go beyond meeting the basic bare minimum standards and do more relative to what's necessary for your clinic. And I can tell you that these score questions that I have here for you today that we just went through are only about meeting the basics. And if you're over 200 points, you've got some serious multiple deficiencies, and you need to get on your compliance program right now. You may not have any compliance program at all and be in that shape as well. Most likely at 200 plus, they're going to throw you in the willful neglect. They're going to say you've not been keeping up and doing what you knew or should have known, and you're going to have minimum fines and all kinds of problems. So if you're in that category, we need to get started with something right away. Now, we do have a survival kit that we provide. The survival kit is an A to Z HIPAA program for it's geared to have support staff be able to implement as much as 90% of your HIPAA compliance program and manage that program. So that takes very little doctor time The program was built with that in mind, so it does not quote a lot of law. It doesn't quote the standards and all of this. It tells you step by step what to do. And the compliance or survival kit consists of a workbook and CDs, so you can listen or read or both to learn. It's very step by step. It tells you exactly what to do. It references you and guides you to the document CDs that come with the program that have all of the policies that you need. They can be tweaked to fit your office. They have the forms that you need. They have authorization forms. They have release forms. They have the notice of patient privacy policy. They have business associate contract forms, the new ones from the omnibus rules. It's got everything that you need. It's got an annual training, a disc that has the required topics for you to train on, so you can play that for your staff and they can sign a sign-in sheet, put that in your compliance manual, and meet that technical obligation. And if you hire a new person, you're required to train them on HIPAA, not just have them sign a confidentiality. But this way, instead of having to put on a whole seminar for them, you can simply have them listen to the disc. There are many great features in this program, and the typical kit sells for $549, but you can get a $60 discount by putting in the coupon code at the site if you order it at the website. If you want more information about the survival kit, there's more information at the website, or you can call us or email us, and we're glad to answer your questions. While we do have some consulting services that we seldom use because it's seldom needed in an office, while I will come on site for $4,000 plus expenses and put your HIPAA program in for you, you don't want me to do that. In all honesty, virtually every practice can simply be compliant by following the $549 survival kit. Again, if you have special needs, more money than time, you want somebody to do it, we can talk about that. But 99% of all people who have a practice will be able to do everything that they need from the survival kit. So please contact us today if we can help you with that. If you want more information on the threats and the issues today that are taking place, please feel free to call or email us. And again, if you purchase the survival kit and you have a question about the kit as you're implementing, we're glad to answer quick questions for you at no additional charge or consulting fees to keep you on track. So I hope this helped. I hope it helped you get a relative idea of where you are. Again, the score questions were made to go over just the basic requirements. And so if you don't have these in place, you are at danger level. If you were to be audited, have a complaint, or have a random audit. Again, call us, contact us if we can help. I'm going to say goodbye for now.